admiral in the Navy, but he was the chief chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Each of the services had chiefs there. The Army, Navy, and Air Force. The Marines didn't have one then. They do now, but they didn't then. I didn't know why that was. My boss, who was at Langley, General Momeyer, called me and he said, "Did you get a call from the Pentagon?" And I said, "Yes, I did." And I said, "What is it all about?" He said that I don't know. So it was a mystery to me over the weekend. I got another call. It said I had an airplane, a T-39 in the job that I had. I could take off anytime I wanted to go, which was often. And I was asked to stop at Fort Bragg. The landing there was to be at Pope Field, Pope Air Force Base, to pick up an Army colonel. And so I did, and I picked him up the first time I met him. Bull
Simons?
Bull Simons, Colonel Bull Simons, Arthur D. Simons. And he had been called also. And he didn't know why either. So we had dinner together at the Andrews Club that night, and we wondered, what in the world is it? And we came to the conclusion it must be some kind of a study. And, it's something that we didn't care much to do. Because he was happy with what he was doing. I was happy with what I was doing. And who knows? It probably will have to be somewhere for 4 or 5 months working on a study of some kind that will probably not go anywhere anyway. And we liked what we were doing. So we had a contact to meet there, and we met the contact. And we were then ushered into the chairman's office. Real nice person, Admiral Moore. I got to know him fairly well at later times. And we were there just a short time. It wasn't a long meeting. And basically what he said was, we have a reason to believe that we could do something for our POWs. That's a bad situation for POWs in Vietnam. There were over 500 Americans. Former commander of this university was one of the POWs. Anyway, he said, we'd like to do something for them. And then there were the main prisons, Hollow and Kulak, were in downtown Hanoi. That's where the bulk of them were. But there were others in smaller POW camps surrounding. And they had done, some studies had been done on it, and they had come up with one at Phuket. Phuket? Not Phuket. Son Tay. At Son Tay, and it seemed like that one was a logical one to study further, and he said if we could land there with a force to show them that we have some concern we had a lot of concern for the POWs, and the morale must be terrible in those places. They must have given up hope that we're going to get them back somehow to their home. And of course that was true. So if we could just land there and do something there, the word would spread, and all of them, even those at Hollow and Kulak, would get the news that we're concerned. The country has not forgotten them. If possible, we could bring those that are in the camp where we stopped, where we raided, and that would be real good too, to bring them home. And he said, what we'd like for you to do, if you'll agree to do it. In other words, we weren't directed to do this. We were asked if we would. And boy, that sounded great to us. I had a lot of friends who were POWs, and I felt badly for them. And so did Simon. We all did. I think the country did. Certainly the families did. And so we agreed to do it. He said, come back and tell us whether or not you can do it. And if you can, tell us when you would do it. And we were excused. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
So we came out of there, scratching our heads, and we made a few thoughts right then. Certainly we're going to do it. And we're going to move on this as fast as we can. It's going to be highly classified. It's going to be Army and Air Force. It's going to be joint. And they intended it for it to be joint because Bull Simons was Army, I was Air Force. I don't know why we were selected, but anyway, we were happy to have been selected to do that. So the first thing for us to do was to establish some planning. We had to do some planning. And we got some guidance from the people who worked at a section called SACSA, Special Assistant for Counterinsurgency and Special Activities. And I'll think in a moment or two, the man in charge of that, he was very helpful. He was a brigadier general, and he had been in special ops for a long time. Anyway, we set up this planning group, bringing in people who we happen to know as planners, the Army, Air Force, a couple civilians, and they were, of course, not given much information initially. We checked them out to make sure that the people that we could trust with secrets, we were given a secured place in the Pentagon where we could work. And that progressed real well. We made contacts with each of the intelligence agencies in the Washington area. And at each of those agencies, we were able to establish one point of contact, just one person, and only that person would know what we're talking about. He would gather information, but none of the rest. In the Washington area particularly, I think secrets are hard to hold. But if we didn't have a secret of what we were doing, and the enemy learned that we were planning to do something like this, it could be a disaster. And we had to avoid that at any cost. Okay, next thing we decided that everyone who participates on this, Army and Air Force members, would be volunteers. So Simons went to Fort Bragg to seek volunteers. I went back home to the Air Force, and we decided on the airplanes. Many of these decisions we made early, and we didn't have to change them. We had 5 HH-53s. We were going to take the force there in 53s, HH-50 helicopters. That was a big helicopter, replaced by another airplane today flown by this gentleman.
CV-22.
The CV-22,
Sir.
yeah, it's a great airplane. And it has taken the place of the helicopters, of the HH-53. And one HH-3, that's a smaller one. Well, we couldn't land in the prison compound with a 53. It was too big. But we could land with a smaller helicopter, which we had, with the HH-3. Anyway, we got the forces together from those helicopters and brought them in. I gave them the same information that was given to the people at Fort Bragg, which was that we were working on a humanitarian assignment, a very important one. We couldn't tell them much more about it than that. Do you want to participate? If you want to participate, you stay here and we'll go further. If not, you can leave. Now, nobody left. Now, in the Fort Bragg situation, finally there were something like 500 that gathered in a room, probably something like this, and they were all interviewed, and out of that group, 100 were selected. Okay, back to airplanes. In addition to the helicopters, we want some cover for them. Well, in our unit right there on Hurlburt were some A1s. Well, we didn't have the gunships today that we had then. We probably would have used gunships. Anyway, the A1 can carry good fuel, a good bomb load, bombs under the wings, and it had good endurance, could carry plenty of fuel. So we got them on board, got those pilots in. Pilots with a great deal of experience right there at Hurlburt. We needed some some special C-130s, combat Talon C-130s. And I had 4 in my unit. There were 4 in Germany. There were 4 in the Philippines. I mean, in Asia, in Taiwan, not Taiwan, Vietnam. Anyway, they were in the Pacific area. We needed 2. We always have some redundancy, some need for redundancy. We had redundancy in airlift, and as far as bringing POWs out with our helicopters, except for the HH-3, we weren't going to bring it back. We decided that we wouldn't do that. So we had our force ready. We wanted to integrate the Army people and the Air Force people. Now today, that works in an entirely different way. But it was all separate then. In each of the services, they weren't working together very much, except on an occasional exercise. So the Army people were brought to a field right near, what's the name of the base? Right near Eglin. The Eglin is a wide area, it's a big area. Some of you know that. Some of you have been there. And we could train there without making a big fuss about it, without making it known public. We could secure some places in the wooded areas around there, and do whatever training we needed to do, and we did that.
Sir, with the time we have left, I'd like to move forward just a little bit. We're starting to run out of time a little bit.
I will bring that back.
So if we can move forward to the execution of the raid. So you guys trained and then briefed the Secretary of Defense.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're moving way. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Time doesn't allow to go in the detail that I'm going in here. But anyway, it worked out well. It worked out well. So we on the I think it was the 14th of September. It was on the 8th of August that we got the mission. We went back to the Pentagon and briefed the chairman and the other chiefs. It can be done. We can do it, and we want to do it in September. No, that's not right. We want to do it in October 21st. October 21st, we were going to do this at night, in the middle of the night. It had the moon structure that we wanted as far as the amount of light that we could cope with on the ground. Not completely dark, some light, but not a full moon either. And that would happen between the 20th and the 25th of September. Anyway, our briefing went well with the group at the Joint Staff. They approved it. Incidentally, I also briefed that we wouldn't bring back a helicopter. We'd leave it there. We'd destroy it before we left. No problem. They didn't say a word about it. But they said, we haven't got the authority to give you that clearance now. It has to go to the Secretary of Defense, and it has to go to the President. Well, to make this shorter, we went as soon as we could. We briefed the Secretary of Defense, Mr. Laird, Mel Laird, and he accepted our briefing. He says, that sounds good. He said, but I don't have the authority to give you the final approval. It has to go to the White House. So it was some time before we could go and brief at the White House, but we did. The President was out of town. Kissinger and an Army general, can't think of his name right now, it was his aide, and they accepted the briefing, and they had some questions, but they thought we had a good plan, and they said, I'm going to get to the President on this to get his clearance as quickly as I can, but he said it'll take some time. How soon must you have a decision in order to make your schedule? I said, I've got to have it by tomorrow night. He said, I can't do it by tomorrow night. And so we discussed that, and I couldn't let it go any further because we were all still at Eglin. We had to move this force to Thailand. We were going to take it to a base in Thailand. It would take some time. But we had an alternate date. The alternate date was the same time in November, the 20th to the 25th. We can cope with that. except what concerned me is this is another 30 days of possibility that the information would get out to the North Vietnamese and put us in a bad situation. And if we knew that they knew, then we wouldn't go. We've got to have that knowledge that it's secret, because all we're taking in there, we determined then that we didn't need 100 men. We need Simons is the one. He was the Army expert on this, and he determined that's what they needed to do that job. So we had no choice. We made some additional training and produced some additional equipment that would help us and so forth. And so we made good use of that 30 days. Our planning was completed in the Pentagon. We disbanded. We didn't disband it all, but we moved that unit to my headquarters at Eglin. Not the entire group, just a portion of it that we still needed to do some planning on, and the other one was finished. Next, I needed some airlift to move that force to. Well, before that, Simons and I made a trip to Thailand. I mean to Vietnam, and we briefed the general there, who was the commander of. Forgotten his name already.
General Abrams, sir. General Abrams.
General Abrams, and we briefed him on what we were doing. He didn't know anything about it, and it was. He had been told by the chairman on a message that we were coming to give him an important briefing. I went through the briefing on what we were there to do and when we were going to do it and how we were going to do it. And I said, "Do you have any questions?" He just sat there smoking a big cigar. And I thought, here we are bringing a force in from the outside into his area. He's the theater commander. And there's no, we didn't know how he would take it. So I said, "Sir, this is what we plan to do and how we plan to do it. Do you have any questions?" He says, "Yes, I've got a question. Who are you working for when you do this?" "I'm working for the Secretary of Defense and the President. I've been approved by the President." He said, "I've only got one statement." Not a question, just a statement. "Anything that you need that I have here, forces or whatever, that you need to help the success of this is yours." Well, we didn't need that, but we needed some help from as far as the air was concerned. And the Colonel, or rather General Lou Clay, Air Force, I knew him, was also in that briefing, just the two of them and us. And he said, "I presume that applies to you, Lou?" And he said, "Yes, it does." So gee, we had all the help. It was great. Anyway, then we went out to the ship and talked to the commander of the fleet, the Navy, U.S. Navy, and briefed him on what we were doing. And we said, "We'd like to have your help to put a feint attack toward Saigon on the night that we do this." He said, "I'll do it." And he launched 60 sorties that night from his carriers to do that.
General, we have about 5 minutes left, sir. When we spoke about the mission, you mentioned that after they started execution and Bull Simons reported that there are no POWs, you were out on Monkey Mountain, and initially it was kind of a shock. But in later years, you determined that the mission was a success due to its importance to the POWs in Vietnam.
Yeah.
Can you speak just for a minute on that for the
and that's about the time we have.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay, so we have to move the force from here to Thailand, and at an air base in Thailand, where Secret Service had an area there that we could take, which was a good place for non-intelligence to leak, and we launched out of Udorn in northern Thailand, and all went well on the launch. And in our training, one thing that I had stressed, we've got checkpoints as we go along. And I want to be able to measure that checkpoint, not in minutes, in seconds. I want this to be really on time all the way. And and that worked. But that was the discipline that we had going in there. With all the helicopters and all the aircraft that I've mentioned already. And I can't give you any details on what happened. We haven't got time to do that. But it went well on the ground. Except in my command post at Monkey Mountain, I was watching this. I had communications with everything that was going on. I had communications with Washington and communications with the Navy that was providing support. And communications with some aircraft that are gathering intelligence and supporting us, the aircraft from Strategic Air Command. This was a big operation. And we had 117 airplanes from, 136 airplanes from 17 airfields and aircraft carriers that took off to do this mission. But unfortunately, when the troops landed, there was an enemy force at the camp, but there were no Americans. And a firefight took place, and we didn't lose anyone. Now, the Vietnamese had heavy losses there, because we were trained to fight at night, and this was at night, and we woke them up, and they came out shooting, and we had one man that got hit by an enemy bullet. We got Sergeant LeRoy Wright, who was a sergeant on the helicopter that landed there in the compound. He suffered a broken ankle, and those were the only injuries that occurred that night, and there were no deaths. We didn't lose anybody. The 105s, I told you we had some 105s that flying overhead. Okay, we had a loss there. But anyway, when I got word that there were no POWs, I said, extricate the force, bring the force out, but be sure that you account for everyone that went in there. I want everyone to be on those helicopters coming out. And that was done. And so the helicopters were loaded, and people came out. And of course, the one that we left there, we destroyed. One C-130 had already gone and was flying over Laos. The other one stayed there. The last airplane to leave the area was a Combat Talon C-130, and they all come out. But they didn't come out as a formation. They came out all together, all separate. Okay, the 105 that was providing cover got hit by a missile, and he was there, of course, to fight the missile a bit. But he got hit, and but there were 5 altogether of those, and that crew had to bail out. And they bailed out over the mountains of Laos. I knew exactly where they bailed out. I had contact with them, and we were able to get a coordinate of where they were. We passed that coordinate to one of our helicopter crews that was waiting to bring out POWs, and of course they didn't have to do that because we didn't have the POWs. And they were able to contact the 2 pilots that landed on the ground and bailed out in the mountains at night. This was about 3 o'clock in the morning. They were able to make contact with them and landed and picked them up and brought them to Udorn, and they had them at Udorn by nighttime, by daylight. And of course the force all came in then. Simons and I got, of course I made a report right away to Washington on what the situation was. And Simons and I got word to report to come to Washington as quick as we could, because a lot of questions were being asked that we had attacked and destroyed a prison camp. You know, it had aroused problems among the people who heard that gee, maybe some POWs got hurt in doing that. Well, that didn't happen. So we got on a Pan American flight to Washington out of Saigon, and as quickly as we could. We made a stop in Honolulu. We were met in Honolulu by Admiral McCain, and he had canceled our flight from there on to Washington and scheduled his airplane to take us the rest of the way, but he wanted to talk with us. He wanted to know what happened and so forth. Remember, he's got a son who's a POW. And anyway, we had a good visit with him. We had breakfast with him, and we got on his airplane. And before he left, and I'll never forget this, he said, "Don't let anybody tell you that this mission was a failure," because we felt that we had failed in some way and that we didn't bring any POWs out. but we knew that we had given the message that we were there. So that was good. Anyway, he said, we will learn as time goes on that a lot of good will have accumulated from having done this. So we moved on, and we got to Washington and got to the Pentagon. Of course, they knew we were coming, and they met us there and brought us. There was a meeting with the defense people and the chief of staff, the joint staff officers. We had a meeting, and it was decided that we have a meeting with the press. So we had a meeting with the press there in the Pentagon, and then we went to the White House and briefed the president. I think you saw a picture of that up here on the screen. I had the place of honor, I guess, sitting there next to the president, and briefed him on what took place. Simons was there with me. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Admiral Moore, was there. Secretary of Defense was there. The advisors, the German fella. Anyway, the president's staff was there also at the president's office.
Yes, sir.
And we thought we'd get some static from the Congress. We didn't. There was some problem. Some people said that it was a foolhardy thing to do, that we had endangered some of our people on this team. And what did we do? We didn't bring any out. Well, and books have been written who have highlighted the fact that we didn't bring any out, and they didn't give enough weight, I don't think, to the fact that it affected the POWs. If we had a POW here, I think he could tell you that it helped the morale of the POWs in that we did this. As far as I'm concerned, it was a success.
Thank you, sir. So we're out of